Our last individual speaker is David Seymour from ACT New Zealand.
All right, well, look, thank you very much. I've been seated beside Chloe Swarbrick, who wants you all to know that she drove here using a car from a car-sharing company, so driving is believing, it turns out. Look, a lot of my background is business. I grew up in a business household. Electrical contractors, so I spent a lot of time hearing about copper prices and exchange rates, labour disputes and barges falling off diggers somewhere, or diggers falling off barges somewhere in the Pacific. As my grandfather said about payroll, it's a lot of money on Thursday, son. And today, as the MP for Epsom, I spend a lot of time with the equivalents of North Harbour business, the business improvement districts, the Newmarket Business Association, Parnell Business Association, and so on, and hear about the effects of this year. And for some, it's actually been fantastic. You know, if you're into interior decorating, you've got people who can't spend their money overseas, 5 weeks inside, looking, I don't like that anymore, and business is booming. Can't get it out the door fast enough. But there's many I talk to where I can see and hear in the voice of business people that things are not good, as it often happens with small business and large business for that matter. Business troubles bleed into your personal finances, and the best I can say is you had a good business beforehand, COVID's not your fault, and yes, I think you're going to recover. But a lot of that is going to depend on the policy choices that the next government makes. And I would say that there are three key issues that any parliament elected is going to have to address. The first is, how do we get Taiwan smart about our public health response? And that means that we actually need a specialised response unit, much like their epidemic command centre. We need an epidemic response unit because, you know, the Professor Gormans, the Murray Horns of the world will tell you the Ministry of Health is a policy shop. It's not there to do software development. It's not there to distribute PPE, as we've unfortunately seen. You need government to set the rules of the game, not try and be a player, because often you find the government's not enforcing the rules and no one's being tested. But also there's a lot of people in the private sector who could accommodate and bring people in so we can safely reconnect with the world, and they're not allowed to do it, including schools that are desperate to bring back their international students so they can balance their budget in your neighbourhood school next year. So we've got to start getting government as setting the rules, not trying to do everything and often do it badly. And then we've got to take a risk-weighted approach. There's no COVID in Samoa, but we treat them like every other country. You know, there's a lot of businesses that need RSE workers, perhaps not in North Harbour, but maybe some people you do business with in horticulture need that to happen. And then we've got to start using better technology. You know, when Sam Morgan offers COVID card, Rob Fife tries to help the government. I think it's a disgrace that some of our best minds are repelled. And finally, we've got to actually start asking every day what we can allow and what we can do safely, rather than constantly saying no and using fear. You know, isn't it interesting? We always get told we're lucky that we're not Victoria. But we don't ask why we aren't comparing ourselves with the other 5 states and 2 territories that are doing very well. We've got to aim higher than constantly comparing ourselves with the worst. If we can get smart about public health, then we've got to be honest about the debt. You know, I get younger and younger people who haven't been interested in politics before saying, who's the government borrowing this money off? And who is going to pay it back? Now, I know some people will tell you, don't worry, interest rates are low, you're a fool not to borrow. But if you study human history, getting into debt never ends well. And we're going to have to live within the same rules as a government as businesses and households have had to do, making economies about expenditure they can no longer afford. We've got to get on top of that debt. But finally, we've got to seize the opportunity of being an island nation on a pandemic planet. Our isolation, our ocean moat, has suddenly gone from being a disadvantage economically to an advantage, making us the place that people want to come to. If only we stop shooting ourselves in the foot with poor policy. And it's the persecution of landlords. Some of the things Paul mentioned, raising the minimum wage when businesses have no revenue. campaigning on extra holidays, campaigning on extra spending that will be paid for with your taxes. It's across all walks of life, persecuting landlords as if they're somehow evil for trying to give people a place to live. Telling farmers that they are bad people and constantly regulating them, often in ways totally impractical for the reality of life on the farm. If we can get our regulatory and tax environment right, then actually this place could take off like a rocket with an uncertain world facing a pandemic around us. But the alternative is that we continue on with a borrow and hope approach that undervalues business, that doesn't understand if we want to recover out of this, one Kiwi must employ another Kiwi hundreds of thousands of times over the next few years, and that the way this government is going about it, they're only going to introduce new reasons for people to say no or not bother. They are not giving people reasons to build their business, build their productivity, build their jobs, and help us get our way of life back as a reunited country. We can do so much better than that, and that's why I'm asking you to give your party vote to ACT, to hold them all accountable and make sure that we come out of this as a stronger and reunited country. Thank you very much.